Okay.
Hey guys, this is Night of the Batman, and whoa, we have two new guests here. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi,
And I'm Brian Ward. And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Nice.
It's like we've done that before.
Guys, welcome. It's definitely an honor to have you both on. You guys were one of the first Batman podcasts I listened to. I think I told Drea that when I met her. And so yeah, so you guys are among friends. We're gonna have a lot of fun today talking about Batman Imposter. And yeah, my wife is gonna go ahead and get into her brief summary, and then we'll kind of just open the floor up for notes and that kind of thing. All right, go ahead.
So the very quick Spark Notes version. So we kind of open up on Leslie Tompkins. She's Batman, well, Bruce's former therapist. So Bruce kind of just showed up in her house, bloody, beaten, bleeding out. So she patches him up, debates calling 911 to tell the cops. She ends up making a deal with him where if he attends therapy every day and is her patient again, she will keep his secret. Then we are very quickly introduced to a detective named Blair Wong. She's talking to one of Gotham's like 1% about Batman. We see the effects that his escapades have on the upper echelons of Gotham City. Then, boom, there's a larger meeting with cops, groups coming together to figure out who Batman is and to apprehend him because we find out that he killed 3 criminals the night before. Oh, wow, he's an imposter. We have a couple more scenes of like Bruce talking to Leslie about it, being like, I've got to figure out who he is. Blair shows up at Bruce's house. She suspects it's somebody in the 1% who is Batman. They end up in a relationship. You see a slew of villains and how it affects them. There is some... I completely lost my place. Ha! This is why I don't read. I can't read. Okay, that's funny because I have an English degree. So yeah, so Bruce kind of struggles to figure out who it was, who the fake is. There is a interaction with him and the cops. One of the villains is apprehended and ends up killing himself. Blair then catches Batman, finds out he's Bruce, lets him go. We find out the imposter is a cop, and that Batman can no longer be a symbol for hope. Very, very bleak comic. What?
Who wants to go first?
I was gonna say that almost sounds like you have an alternate take, that it's not as
You're like,
nah,
I did not
what
enjoy
I
it.
thought.
I didn't enjoy it. If I'm gonna be honest, but it's fine.
You want to go into that?
I don't know. I like campy Batman. I don't like serious Batman. So
yeah, you like shark repellent Batman.
Yeah, I like my favorite Batman movie is Batman and Robin. So I don't.
Okay, not only are you not wrong, you are not alone. There are other people who feel the same. I'm not one of them, but you are not wrong and you are not alone.
I actually have I have a soft spot for Batman Forever, which is maybe not as campy as the others, but
it still gets there.
It's still kind of in the mid-camp genre, and it's really not a huge fan favorite, so you're in good company. I think you're right. This is a comic, I want to respect the creators and writers of the story. It's a comic that really makes a solid attempt at some groundedness and realism around the hypothetical, if Bruce Wayne were to be in some kind of mental health treatment, but also what would this look like in a city where Batman is weaponized. This is a Gotham City that is one very familiar to us, but the writers seem to want both a very realistic story and then also try to retain and preserve some more classic Batman rogue elements. And it's really a fine line. It's really hard to do that. Where I would agree with you and kind of lose track is, and I'm surprised I'd say this, but as a psychologist, there is a lot of technical psychological components there, and they try really hard to do that. And then, I think you've really got to you've got to kind of pick your side. Like once you get that technical, the rest of the comic has to be similarly technical and grounded and realistic. And so it loses, for me, it just kind of loses that traction.
I think the best parts of the comic are actually when he is talking to Leslie. Those are the parts I enjoyed the most.
Yeah. I guess we could talk about this because this was one of my notes. Batman is a very versatile character, and so I feel like in this story, a lot of the elements of his world are kind of stripped away. Like Alfred is kind of a douchebag in this and like just completely abandons them. Leslie is pivoted from like a medical doctor to a psychological doctor. Gordon's not really in it. He gets booted out before the events of the story even happen. Like a lot of the elements of Batman's world in this are very different. And somehow it's still like you were kind of saying, it still kind of skirts that line of still being familiar, but also very different. Almost feels like a movie pitch in some ways. I don't know if you guys felt that too.
Yes, I certainly did. I sort of felt I have really mixed feelings on this book because I there's so many things that I like the idea of, but am now realizing I don't know if I ever really wanted this book to exist, even though I thought I did. This book, it's sort of like Drea was saying, it really does try its best to live in a very grounded world, where Dre and I had very similar conversations when we were doing Batman the Animated Series on our podcast. Was like, this wouldn't happen if a psychologist found out who he was. Let's know what would happen, and let's know what and Commissioner Gordon, or Commissioner, in this case he was Captain Gordon, he never even made it to Commissioner, was booted out of the GCPD because he was aligned too heavily with a vigilante. And I believe that would happen. I think that that's true. Alfred does abandon Bruce in a very realistic manner, because I always had a hard time believing that Alfred would just remain his butler. The child has to have a caregiver. The child has to have a legal guardian, not an employee. And Alfred has never surpassed, while he does have father figure tendencies, he's still always been the loyal servant to Master Bruce. And so that always gave me problems. And now I'm realizing when you do put all those things into a book, they're all just horrible people. And I think that's probably true. I think Gotham is filled with just horrible people. But it made it really hard to root for anybody. And so while I applaud Tomlin for making the effort, I mean, even going so far as, Sorrentino does the art, and it's very human, it's very realistic, almost as if it were painted over photos. It's got a very rotoscoped feel. So they are grounding everything in so much reality that it almost falls apart and doesn't work.
The going back to the art, there are some parts that it is very realistic, but it's also almost like it almost borderline experimental in some places. Like they'll have like the panel layout isn't traditional in some places. They'll have moments where it almost like I'm thinking of one scene where like it like flips around and it's almost circular looking thing, which I don't know if you guys had a problem. Not like really like reading it, but I know when I was looking at it, I was just kind of like, okay, I had to orient myself to like how the story was progressing.
I wonder if that was intentional. There was that one panel where you have to turn the book upside down, or if you're talented, just read the words upside down. But
just do like this.
Typically, I am a fan of sequential art. This is a storytelling narrative that is actually really good for our brains, especially anyone who has neurodivergent brains, because a neurodivergent brain, because it allows us to kind of follow the story and the art in a very open-ended way. And for me, especially if there's something on a splash page or there's something that is different like this, I'll actually explore the story. I might read it again and go back to the first panel, or just sit with that particular element of the moment. And I think a lot of people will decipher it and explore it differently. And that's usually really cool. But something about, I hate to be so critical about it, something about this was more frustrating and disorienting for me rather than kind of cool and curious.
Yeah.
Have you read The Court of Owls? Run
No.
for New 52. So
No,
they do
no,
something
we definitely have. She just doesn't necessarily remember that.
I've not read all of
Apologies.
it. I've not read all of it because that
Okay.
was probably 2011, right? I've read some parts of it, but I haven't read the when they put it into one book. I did not read that book.
Okay,
Oh,
so
right.
there's a part in it where it does the same thing. And I'm very much like I'm very like structured. So like whenever I'm reading something, if I have to like stop and like move stuff around, I get really frustrated. And I remember when I got to the part where I flipped the book, I was so mad. I'm pretty sure like I like yelled or something.
You
and
had
were, like,
you had to.
oh, I was talking about on this one.
Oh,
The other
okay.
day.
I thought you meant on the Court of Owls thing. I'm like, you had a visceral reaction
did.
from my
I
from my
hated it.
memory. Yeah, I was just like, oh, okay, all right. I didn't have
But
that, but cool.
I'm pretty sure when I was reading this the other day, I like made a noise or like grunted in frustration. And you were like, "Are you okay?"
Oh
In
yeah.
like the other room.
Oh yeah. I was just like, what's going on in there?
So I'm actually really interested that like it's good for your brain, or like it's good to like engage your brain like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, Brian. One of your running gags from early on in Arkham Sessions is Batman have a borderline personality disorder. He gets diagnosed with a lot. Do we think he has a borderline personality disorder in this?
I'll let Brian take that one first.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no. I'm going only because Drea has beaten into my head that there's no personality. He's doing the best with what he's been given. Although in this case, he is a bit, in your words, Alex, a bit of a douche, similar to Alfred. Actually, I thought Alfred was okay. I thought Alfred was
Really?
pretty reasonable. We see Alfred come into Tompkins' office and say, "Look, what do I do? How do I help this child who's clearly overly aggressive? He's getting into fights. I am not a parent figure. I am just the head of the staff at Wayne Manor. We don't know how to handle him." And she's like, "Look, there's only, we have to be patient." And he's like flipping out. And but I think Bruce is certainly more problematic in this incarnation. And let's be honest, this isn't supposed to be canon. It's clearly an Elseworld story from DC's Black Label. And so I don't mind that. I don't mind seeing a Bruce who never got rid of the anger. In any other incarnation, Bruce, by the time he's an adult, will have learned to mask all of that. And he will walk into Leslie Tompkins' office and present as perfectly normal. And meanwhile, we know that he's, huddled away in the Batcave at night, wringing his hands. In this particular case, his relationship with Wong was really problematic for me, mainly because I really wanted it to work.
Me too. Yeah. I think we're all on the same page. Like we wanted Bruce to that was one of my notes. I'm like, what do we think of Batman in Love? I know some people don't like when he gets in relationships, but I like this. I think this is actually like, I would like to see her incorporated into the actual main canon. I don't know if you guys, like, obviously you guys are a fan of their relationship, but do you guys feel the same? Like, would you like to see this character continue and other things?
I thought it was a fairly healthy relationship in the beginning before things got complicated.
Well, we were tricked just like she was. She's our
Sure.
proxy. She's our proxy in the story.
Sure, sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think to see them connect, and I think it's their first date or the first night that they spend together, for one of them to say, this wasn't about talking about the case or talking about our professions. This was getting to know one another on a human level. And that's something that he doesn't frequently allow himself that level of intimacy and closeness. And there was something about them meeting and being able to trust one another. Trust is a really big issue for Bruce Wayne. And for him to at least on some level trust her and become close enough to her that that it's not transactional. It's not the type of relationship he's used to where he needs to be overly protective, or he needs to weaponize somebody, or he needs to have this contingency related to the relationship. It has some level of healthy and actually really mutually beneficial relational well-being to it. Having said that, it kind of going back to Alex, your question around like what do we think about his diagnoses, the therapy. So he has therapy when he's a child, and then he kind of continues on when he's an adult. And what I appreciated is that as a child, he was already given these diagnoses, and most of them transferred into his adulthood. And that's actually really common, where some of these disorders will stay fairly relatively stable throughout someone's life. So I think oppositional defiant disorder was mentioned, and that typically is not an adult disorder. That typically turns into actually antisocial personality disorder,
Which is what I have always said.
which is what
he
you have said,
has.
yeah, or other
Yes.
things. I don't want to, that's a very general term, but what stays consistent is PTSD. And I would actually say, I think there is a characterological personality problem here, and it's typically around relationships. But the thing that is pretty stable and consistent is his post-traumatic stress. And and that remains unresolved from childhood to teenagehood to adulthood. And he's still a fairly youngish Batman here, right? So like,
yes,
that
he's only been back for 3 years.
Yeah, so that is still probably what I would consider as a psychologist, like the primary disorder continues to be PTSD. But
yeah, like early on, she says acute anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, possibly on the spectrum, the PTSD, of course.
Right, of course, right.
Right, of course.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Those are a lot. And yeah, I think the thing, and she mentions empathy. Do you have the comic in front of you? So
yes,
she mentions Brian, I think Brian has it, something about lacking empathy when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Is that right, Brian, in that same panel?
Well, he says the rage that drove his guardian away, the rage that I'm sure was his compass guiding him when he disappeared for 6 years. I told him that if he didn't learn how to control that rage, it would get him killed. I do remember what you're talking about, but it's not on this same page. She keeps coming back to this from time to time. And yeah, but
I'd say that as far as how we're distinguishing this Batman from others, that for me is the main difference. That this story claims to show some declining empathy or lack of empathy, whereas most of the stories that I'm reading, there's a lot of empathy. In fact, almost too much empathy. that he's really so protective of other people sometimes that he, deprives them of closeness because he's avoidant of so much emotion. He's avoidant of so much closeness and the feelings that are related to it. And sometimes that may come across as not having empathy, but when you dig deeper,
But he's protecting them by not allowing them to get close.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you dig a little deeper, it seems like it is really empathetic, but this book claims that he's lacking empathy.
Yeah.
Well, and you kind of get that with the Wong relationship, because what we don't necessarily remember as we watch it unfold is that he came right out in the beginning and said, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm getting close to her. I'm going to use the fact that we both watched our parents die in front of us in order to get close to her. And then we get tricked as well. He already told us what he was going to do. And then when they have their first sort of coffee date or whatever, and he's like, oh, we have so much in common. And she's like, what, the fact that our parents died in front of us? He's like, no, I was going to say we both went to Ivy League schools and then spent some time over in Asia, and
he's smooth.
She gets embarrassed. He gets super smooth. And then the relationship moves forward and we get lost in this montage of events where then they start to hold hands. And then presumably he's telling Leslie the relationship is different than it was when it started, except we kind of then understand that he wasn't really telling Leslie that. He was almost telling us and Wong that, and then they spend the night together. And he immediately gets up, goes to her computer and starts looking at her files. And in the caption, it says, only the mission matters. It was always about that. Just comes right out and says it. And you're like, oh, this guy's a monster.
Yeah.
I don't agree with you though. You're with me.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, I thought that he was more trying to convince himself of that. That's how I read that.
Yeah, was he trying to talk himself into it? But one of the things I was gonna say, before I forget, is that, like I said earlier, a lot of the core tenets of Batman are missing in this. Do we feel like he doesn't? The reason maybe he has less empathy, if we believe that to be true, is because his support system doesn't really exist in this. Like Alfred is gone, Commissioner Gordon gone, like Leslie's there, but like it seems very strained. Like they don't really talk that much. Do we feel like that has a factor in it? Maybe.
You make
I think
an excellent point. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, I think the fact that Alfred and the entire staff leave certainly doesn't help. And then when she visits his home and she sees just how dingy and sparse it is, and his response is, I'm not big on butlers, is it says a lot that the only people who could have helped him and supported him through it are now gone, with the exception of Leslie. But she isn't a caregiver, she is his therapist. So she's only going to listen to what he tells her, and she's just going to take those sessions and make judgments and whatever, one way or another. But ultimately Tompkins is supposed to be the replacement for Alfred. Drea made an interesting point as we were talking about it, that really the only reason you get rid of Alfred is so that she can be the one that stitches him up and listens to his story.
He needs her to be the healer. Usually it's Alfred who takes care of him. Yeah, no, you're right.
Well, so I'm now becoming obsessed with this Wong relationship. I totally agree that is that either interpretation that but something that fascinates me, and this is in the storytelling, the way that it is constructed, is in the big moment, the big splash page where it's after we've seen the montage, and then the big splash page of them kissing with the bats around them, the red umbrellas flying away. The only text in there is "I'm falling in love." Now, interestingly, it's in quotes, Normally, this would mean he's telling someone that. That's not narration. He's telling someone that. Except I almost think it's placed there on purpose in that way, as if to be equally deceitful. I'm falling in love.
Hmm.
And at no point in time during the rest of the montage is he quoted while telling his story.
Well, in the
And
page before, he says I'm, and it is,
well, I am, yeah.
or I am,
Yeah.
and it is a hint or a suggestion that he might start to say, I am Batman.
Mhm.
No?
Well,
Did you read it? So instead he says, I'm falling in
maybe.
love.
Yeah, because every other image are the images of bats.
So this
But-
is the curse and the disease that the Arkham Sessions have, is that we are unable to just stop. We just it's a spiral of analysis, and we
But
will
what's
never
great is, the panel in which the quoted text comes is that
Mhm.
extreme close up of the bat with the fangs. And
And
in
what's
quotes,
next to that?
I'm falling in love. And it's on the panel with the bat and the fangs.
This is every
He's
showing it
episode,
to
by
him.
the way. This is how they are usually in their episodes, by the way.
You know, the wonderful thing is that we can both be right. You know, it's
I think I'm falling in love with this book.
It's interpretation. And
There you
that's
go.
what-
Yeah.
Exactly.
if you have the textual evidence to back it up, every reading of a text is true.
Yeah,
There you
it's
go.
all subjective. But yes.
Can I
Yeah.
just add one more piece of evidence that he might be emotionally connected to her is later when he is
Hold on, while you're doing
I
this, I'm
have
going to
the
look for
quote.
my counter. I'm going to look for my counter argument to whatever it is you're saying. So you keep going. Go
I
ahead.
don't want to take over their show, but let me just say later when he back kicks her because he's trying to capture Ratcatcher.
Wesker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Yeah,
No,
Ratcatcher.
yeah. Otis, right? So
Otis.
he's
Flanagan.
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
Yeah.
back, he has to get her away from them. And so he actually has to assault her.
Yeah.
And then later tells his therapist, that was the hardest thing I had to
Yeah.
do.
He says to get to Flanagan, I had to hurt her. It's the
Yes.
worst thing I've ever done.
Oh.
Which is why I don't think you can diagnose him with certain, because he does seem to have remorse.
He does.
You know, he wouldn't be a psychopath in that moment. He's just simply someone who feels like he has to do whatever he has to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but still, hurting a cop doesn't mean that he was falling in love with her, or like feeling bad for hurting a cop doesn't mean he was falling in love with her.
But the fact that he specifically said it's the worst thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of not great things in his life. But the fact that he had to hurt her, and like there was emphasis put on the fact that it was her that he was hurting.
But also the literal is because you do go back to the flashback of him, kicking her a mile away. And then but I also read that as the whole relationship was a horrible, horrible thing that I had to do. He didn't just hurt her by kicking her in the stomach. He hurt her by getting close to her and knowing this can't work. It will never work, but I have to do this. And it's the most horrible thing I've ever done. And so
I hey, I think that's a fair interpretation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Valid.
So I wanted to bring this up. A lot of the villains in this are different. Like they like for instance, Ratcatcher is way more sympathetic in this. The ventriloquist is not really the ventriloquist, like he is, but he's really sympathetic. And I've noticed it's the some of the villains in this are very sympathetic to where like they like the ones either with psychological issues or something like that, and they get moments of empathy. Well, Ratcatcher doesn't, but that was actually a heartbreaking scene. But anyway,
Mhm.
The people that are actually really villainized and shown to be really terrible are like people that are in positions of power or authority, like what's his name? The ventriloquist's
Bruce Wayne.
father. Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Ventriloquist's father, or what's the other one? The cop that poses as Batman.
I
Yeah.
cannot remember his name. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Yeah. Do we think that there's like, are they trying to say something? Is the writer trying to say something by doing that? Do you think?
I would say yes. I mean, I think that a lot of the times the reason that crime happens, not like crime specifically, but like crime happens, is
Mhm.
that you have people in power who do nothing to stop it, especially like if people who have wealth are gaining from it. And a lot of the times in Gotham, that's what you see is wealthy people are benefiting from the fact that there's crime happening,
Yeah.
and that when the crime is stopped, their business goes down. Um, and so I think it's talking about that like the people in positions of power gain more power by taking advantage of
Yeah.
those who don't have money, don't have access to power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say this was where the story is more grounded than other comics where they really try to uh horrorize, not a
Mhm.
word, but I'll use it that way, horrorize mental health disorders and folks with mental illness. And what we know to be true is that people who live with mental health conditions are more likely to be victims of violence, not perpetrators of violence and perpetrators of manipulation and power grabs and things like that. So this whole story, I think, really kind of captures that occupation and captures um, that power dynamic. And as you said, Alex, there's some tragedies here.
Yeah.
It is upsetting and surprising to see suicide and a lot of distress among what are traditionally considered the rogue characters, the villains. And I think what I was missing too was seeing more of Batman's relationships with those villains.
Yeah.
It seemed like just a different take on his his sympathy. I could have used a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Except they do very wisely give him that at the very end.
Mhm.
The last panel is him sending ventriloquist to Leslie and saying,
Yeah.
my friend will help you.
Mhm.
Implying that she's helped him in some way and can vouch for her. And with a signed note of simply putting the bat symbol on a piece of paper, we see Wesker go into her office seeking help.
Yeah. And then I was gonna say this because we've acknowledged that like this Batman's a little bit more cruel. This was written by one of the people in the early stages that contributed to the Batman script, and helped with that development. This came out at a time when people were really anxious, like looking forward to the Batman and like what that world would be. And this definitely has elements of it. It's kind of a different take. He's very cruel, but at the end, it kind of has like this like optimistic element to it where like, and similar to the Batman where he realizes that he kind of has to pivot and change his approach. Did you guys feel any similarities, or did it give you kind of remind you a little bit of the Batman?
Not only did the story and characterization remind me of the darker sort of Kurt Cobain-esque Bruce, but even down to the costume with
Yeah.
you can see that the concept art might as well have come from this book. That
Mhm.
he's got the very shielded shoulder pads and everything just sort of feels like it was a precursor to what we then see in the Batman.
Yeah, and the bike too, like because I know that
Yes.
in the thing that was another interesting thing. He doesn't have a Batmobile in this, like surprisingly, it was different.
But
That makes Brian so happy.
it does. It really does. I have a love-hate relationship with the Batmobile. But
Really?
oh yeah, yeah. I think so now we're going to get into something that I really liked about the decision making in this. By the way, there
Okay.
was no Batmobile. However, tell me that this image isn't of the back of what would become the Batmobile in the Batman. There is a book, there
Yeah.
is a, for those only listening,
Yeah.
there is a like a car screeching away, very much a muscle car look. But yes, there are certainly elements. But yeah, my love-hate relationship with the Batmobile is that if he is truly meant to be a creature of the night, if he is meant to be seen as a boogeyman, you don't want him driving through traffic.
Yeah.
You do not want to ground yourself in a reality where they go, oh, he's just a dude.
Mhm.
Because as long as he's just a dude, we can beat him. But if he's a nightmarish figure that hides in the shadows and people just talk about maybe having caught a glimpse of him, now you're talking about, something who can genuinely instill fear into the hearts and souls of the cowardly criminal lot. But as long as you're like, oh, I saw the Batmobile on Main Street, so we could go down to Fifth and rob the bank, and
Yeah.
it'll take him a solid 45 minutes to get here. I have problems.
It's is it the realism aspect, like you might get in a traffic jam or something, or
Because Gotham's New York, right? Gotham's supposed to be New York, like a 1-for-1.
oh yeah.
It's a proxy. It could also be
Yeah.
Chicago,
Okay, but
because Metropolis is ostensibly New York.
Yeah.
okay, but like bad traffic.
100% bad
Yes.
traffic. So you have traffic laws that you have to abide by.
Mhm.
You have just the sheer amount of cars on the road. Then if you're driving recklessly, as he often does, you're putting civilians in jeopardy. I don't mind a Batwing because it can fly through the air and nobody necessarily has to see it. But the moment you give him a vehicle with wheels and is grounded, you're now, and by the way, this is also a problem that I have with the bat signal, because as long as he has a bat signal, anybody who wants to do some crime over here knows that in about 30 minutes he's going over to GCPD, and that's on the other side of town. So no big deal. I can go do my crimes over here while he's being beckoned for something far more important. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is my love-hate relationship with Batman, in that I love Batman the character, but I think he's a horrible, horrible hero. And by that I simply mean, because of his popularity in the real world, our world,
Mhm.
you got to keep the story going. Gotham can never be cleaned up.
Yeah.
However,
Mhm.
he is now struggling to clean up the streets of Gotham. The one thing he wanted to do was protect the people walking down alleyways from muggers, and he can't even do that. Forget the
Yeah.
Joker and Two-Face and the one percenters. You can't stop common crime on the streets of the city you swore to protect. And so it just makes you a horribly inefficient hero.
Also, without Batman, you would not have had the supervillains you have in Gotham. Like they kind of like rose up with him.
That is that classic argument. Yeah, exactly. There's that classic argument of did he create them, or did they create him? Simply, we do know that there are certain characters who have come right out and said they came to Gotham to defeat the Batman.
Yeah.
Would that apply to the Joker, or just
Depends on
Bane
your
or somebody?
opinion on
Maybe.
Red Hood. Like under the Red Hood.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's there's a common thing that I'm gonna pull a quote from Kevin Smith. He always says that like superheroes are constantly stuck in the second act. And so like you can't really have like any like a lot of other things that aren't comic books, like say like manga or like limited like mini series and stuff like that, have like a definite beginning and a definite end. with comics, they like how long has Batman been like 30? He's been like 30 for like almost like what was it, like how many anniversaries has he had? It's like 80 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's 80. It's I think we're past 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things you kind of just got, and I agree, like he never fully cleans up the city or fully beats his criminals because then the stories would stop. I
Exactly,
agree.
exactly. Like we have to understand and we have to go along with that conceit that
Mhm.
he can't clean up Gotham because if he does, we don't have any more Batman stories, which is also why I hate the idea of a shared universe with Superman. Because with that, if Superman lives in the same universe, then Superman is a horrible person because he sees a city in squalor and he sees a city that is being choked to death by the one percenters, but also by the criminals who are just trying to get by. And as long as Superman, he has decided not to clean up Gotham due to some sort of unearned loyalty by this dude who can't do it either. And so I do appreciate that this book didn't try to place any other superhumans into his world. Um, but but yeah, yeah, but I love Batman. That's the thing is like we love this character who will fail. No matter how many times he succeeds, he will fail. Drea was in a wonderful documentary many years ago called uh, what was it, Drea? It was what was the documentary you were in from DC?
Necessary
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 Evil.
evil.
Yeah,
Oh
Necessary
yeah.
Evil, the supervillains of DC Comics. There was a wonderful quote in there, and I wish I could remember who it was, who said, if the protagonist is a character that keeps the story moving forward, then villains are actually the protagonists
Hmm.
because they're the ones who have the mission. They're the ones who set the story in motion. They're the ones who do everything they can to succeed, while the antagonist, the hero, is the one doing everything they can to stop the story. And so it's a really interesting take on, and one that I think is true, that really all Batman can do to succeed is just stop this one person's mission tonight.
Yeah.
And forget all the other people in Gotham.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to like stop up like maybe like a flood or something, like maybe like water's oncoming and it's like one, like one part pops out, he runs over there and like tries to cover it up, and then another thing, like it's a never-ending battle kind of
Totally.
thing. Yeah, definitely. And then what were you gonna say,
No,
something?
you're good.
Okay. And then that my notes are pretty light. Did you guys have any other notes, or did we basically hit all the notes that we had?
I am curious about Drea and your take simply on, you mentioned it earlier, that clearly Tomlin tried to
Tompkins.
put as much of the I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the writer.
Oh, the writer. I thought you said
Mattson
Dr.
Tomlin.
Tompkins. Oh, I see.
No, yeah, Mattson Tomlin. I tried to put a significant amount of real life psychological science and
Hmm.
whatever into the book and keep Leslie Tompkins grounded, Dr. Tompkins, because she likes to keep it professional. And as someone who consults for writers of film and television and books and comic books, tell me about that. As someone who is a clinical psychologist reading a comic that is clearly tried.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've said this a lot, especially on panels. Once you decide to get really technical and implement psychological jargon or technical language or names of diagnoses, then you have to really stay accurate through what I would consider the majority of that element of your story. I know that other writers don't do this and there's some fluidity here, but for instance, there's very clearly named childhood diagnoses, adult diagnoses, even some limitations to confidentiality. So when Bruce Wayne gets into therapy with Dr. Tompkins, she describes the limits of their confidentiality as a client and therapist, that, what you say here will be kept private except for certain disclosures. So there really is quite a bit of technical description here, and I liked that. However, there are parts of this that really did frustrate me. The initiation of therapy itself through coercion, if not blackmail, it was basically Leslie telling him, unless you sit through therapy with me, I'm going to report you to the cops.
Yeah.
And I know this is a Batman story, and I know actually
And
that's
she does it several times,
She
not just the
does.
initiation of therapy, but
and
every
that's
day.
the entirety. Yes, that's the entirety of, that's the contingency of the therapeutic bond. And so that's a problem. It's not what anyone does. It's absolutely unethical.
Yeah.
And it's also like no one would do that. No, there's a twisted version of that where the law would it's the opposite. The law would force you to go into therapy. There is mandated counseling if you're required by law to do that, but it doesn't work the other way around. So knowing that he actually resists it the first time, he does not want to do it, and then he inevitably does. And so you get the sense that, at least initially, he's only talking to her because he knows that she will report him. I don't like that relationship. I don't think that's a trusting relationship. You always need to initiate therapy with the client themselves making the choice, not the therapist.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of other things in the beginning of their therapeutic relationship that kind of bothered me, how she treated him. The fact that he had to arrive at a certain time, and like all of the stuff I just felt like was certainly unrealistic. I wouldn't have had that problem if the rest of the psychological elements were sort of also very fictional, but the writer chose to make that more fictional and then other things more technically accurate. And I think, as I don't know how many psychologists are going to read this book, but for me, I just felt like that really took me out of the story.
There was
That's
that
it.
moment, I'm going to tell the world Bruce Wayne is Batman and it will be for your own good, implying that because she has taken him on, she has kept his own good from him also, to some degree.
Yeah, that's fair.
And who's to say that, I would probably say yes, he could benefit from therapy, but she's holding the therapy itself in a certain regard by telling him, I'm the one who needs to treat you, and I know better than you. And I don't know, there's just something there about creating that power dynamic that I feel uncomfortable with.
Yeah. You were gonna say something?
Oh,
I just heard you that sometimes whenever my wife's about to say something, I've noticed that she'll make like a noise or something, and so like I've like subliminally just been like, oh, she's about to say something. So like, oh, okay, you're good though. But yeah, like for me, I like the idea, and I think I haven't read every Batman story, obviously. I don't have that much time, but they finally do something that like a lot of people have said that Batman needs. They give him therapy, but maybe we don't. I get the vibe that we don't necessarily like how he came to that. Like maybe a healthier way would have been better, like Batman getting therapy. And I've seen Batman in healthier mindsets. Like there's a book, and I haven't read the whole thing, but it's called Batman. Like it's one of those New 52 Batman and Robin titles where he moves on from his trauma of like with his parents and everything, and he like does this symbolic thing with Damian where like he had been commemorating the death, and he's like, well, this is the last time I'm doing this because I'm moving past this. And we don't really see that a lot with Batman. So yeah.
I was gonna say therapy doesn't work unless like you want it.
Yeah.
Like my best friend was like in and out for like years, and it didn't work. Like nothing was helpful or beneficial for her until she decided she wanted to go,
Yeah.
Like,
That's
There
something
has to
Drea's even
be-
talked about on our show, that it has to
Right.
be, there has to be consent and a desire to
Mhm.
take in the
Right.
therapy.
I think to force him to sign his name on
Mhm.
this agreement, this is not a therapeutic agreement. This is some other
You called it exactly what it is. It's blackmail.
mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, it's sign this, I'm blackmailing you. No therapist would do that. It's a very twisted way to force him into therapy. And I think too, it also, I was thinking about this from a legal perspective, where he's also disclosing a lot of things. So why the therapy is necessary, again, it's driving the story, and he's telling his therapist, so he's telling us what's going on with the case. And I
Yeah.
kind of like that element, because she's getting into his mind, and these are all the things that are happening.
Mhm.
However, I also disagree with how much he's even telling his therapist. There's all of these blurred lines, blurred consent, confidentiality violations. Like, there's all these things that are happening where, people are opening up other people's files, and like, this is just wildness. And none of this should ever be happening. And if I had, I know he's not officially law enforcement, but um, when you treat somebody who's privy to information that's typically classified, you do not go into those details. That's really not necessary for whatever therapeutic goal you have. So I found that it was almost sensational, and it was, again, to kind of kick up the drama. And I would only say that what I was relieved about is that this is a person in Bruce Wayne's life, Leslie, who has always been somewhat of a trusting figure, a caregiver, someone who understands to some degree his situation psychologically related to his trauma. And I really do like that she is someone who represents that. And here I'm really thankful that they kept this very sort of, I'd say, somewhat like professional, mature bond together, and then it wasn't inappropriate, and then they didn't date, and like stuff that, I think
Mhm.
it could go sideways. So she does still represent that figure of this really knowledgeable and very compassionate person in his life. So I did appreciate that she really held this really important, critical, characterological component in this story for him.
Yeah. Do we, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about this. Do we think that maybe the therapist patient relationship is maybe a little bit more blurred because she's too close to it? Like they know each other, and that's not something you want with the therapist. You want someone that's impartial.
Sometimes
Mhm.
it does help that she is the same counselor he had when he was a child,
Yeah.
so that she really has a good sense of his developmental uh, um, psychological functioning, and elements that she's aware of from when he was a child. But to some degree, yes, you're right. Are these two hanging out outside of therapy? I don't think so. I
Yeah,
didn't get the
no.
sense that there are these other kinds of relationships. If you know someone outside of the therapeutic relationship, you probably shouldn't be their therapist. And I didn't see that here.
Yeah, fair. Well, uh,
Is there anything else you guys want
yeah.
to say?
Bring
Sorry.
Blair Wong into canon.
Yes.
Yes, agreed. Awesome. So at the tail end, before we do our
Non-outro.
yeah, I usually give, like, obviously you guys plug stuff at the beginning. I'll give you guys a chance to plug any other things or any other things you'd like people to know about, and then I'll get into my things, and then we can do our fun non-outro after that. So who wants to go first?
You, Drea, you.
Well, of course, come check out the Arkham Sessions. It is our podcast about the psychology of Batman. Right now, we are actually covering the psychology of X-Men, the animated series from the early 90s. So we're covering quite a bit, and we know that the current Disney Plus show, X-Men 97, is quite popular and gathering a lot of attention. So
Yeah.
just to clarify, we love that show. We are covering the original animated series, season 1. We would love for folks to check us out. So it's the Arkham Sessions. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher and anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then find us on Instagram. I'm Dr. Drea Psychology. We are Arkham Sessions on Instagram.
The Arkham Sessions on
Sorry,
Instagram.
you usually do this part of the show, the Arkham Sessions on Instagram. And if folks are planning on heading out to Comic-Con, we will be there. We can't quite yet announce what we'll be doing, but we'll be at Comic-Con.
Ooh,
That is true.
exciting. Nice.
And yeah, and I'm also on Instagram at B_Ward028. And then Drea took care of our Arkham Sessions handle. So that's I would actually like to mention that I am part of a project that is about to launch on Kickstarter. Two very dear friends of ours, David Nett and Todd Stashwick. Todd is someone people might know, especially if they're Trek fans. He was on the most recent season of Star Trek Picard. They have decided that they want to sort of bring back the wonder, the mystery, and the danger of tabletop role-playing games. And so they have figured out ways to sort of give not just DMs and GMs that feeling that we had when we first started playing, but also the players themselves. And so they're about to launch a Kickstarter, and people should absolutely go check out progcorefantasy.com, so that they can be alerted when that Kickstarter goes live.
I was wondering about the hat. I just didn't want to ask. So
Had to represent.
Nice. And before I forget, this is just for me. I've always wondered this ever since I started listening to your podcast. How did you guys come up with the idea for it? Like, were you guys like, you don't have to go too personal, but were you guys like, had you podcasted before, or like that kind of, like, how did you guys come together to make Arkham Sessions?
It really came down to that documentary that Drea was in. We went to a screening of it at Comic-Con, I think it was, wherever we went to the screening and saw the full movie. It occurred to me that so much of the information that she had as a psychologist, particularly about those Rogues Gallery members, came specifically from Batman the Animated Series. And eventually I was just like, we should just do a podcast where we literally watch every episode in chronological order, not just saving the good ones or doing the good ones first and saving the ones people like least. We went in chronological order so that she could genuinely analyze the arcs of characters. And surprisingly, you wouldn't think that there would be for an animated series ostensibly for children, but there really were. And so we didn't ever actually think we would make it to the end of Batman the Animated Series and the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, or whatever it eventually became. But then 100 and some odd episodes later, we were done, and like, oh, where do we go now? And we've now let folks tell us where they want to go. So we've done Star Trek movies, we've done all the Star Wars movies, we've done the season 1 of Doom Patrol, season 1 of Steven Universe.
Nice.
So very psychologically rich character building stories we have tried to focus on. And as Drea said, now we're doing the X-Men.
What were you saying?
sorry, I was thinking I would love to hear her opinions on Fruits Basket, but like that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
It could be here and there. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
We're open to so many things, because it turns out that there are so many shows. I think it's fair to say, Drea, you and I had never seen Steven Universe, and by the end of season 1, we were like, "Ooh, could we do season 2?" And then patrons decided that we would do something else. But it's definitely coming back to the list. Like we're always going to want to re-explore those characters. So things that we're not familiar with are not something that we shy away from.
We have a process which is on our Patreon. So if folks really are invested in what we cover next, they can join our Patreon, and we have a voting system. We typically start with a handful of suggestions that actually folks have have submitted to us, and
Mhm.
then we take it to a vote and kind of let the listeners on our Patreon decide. So yeah, look us up, Patreon Arkham Sessions, if you feel like there's something you'd like us to cover.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and do my podcast credentials and everything. Oh yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna take a deep breath like I always do because I have a lot. So here we go. So I got obviously this show, Night of the Batman. It's actually rebooted from an old Batman show I do. It's my wife's show, she'll tell you that. Yeah. So we have Flashbacks. It's a Flash rewatch podcast where we cover episode by episode the CW show. We're currently still in season 1, and kind of like what you guys were saying, I'm like, I kind of sometimes feel like it's like we'll get to season 9 maybe like 13 years from now. We'll see what happens, but yeah. And then I have Tangential Exchange, me and my friends. That's way more laid back. Yeah, me and my friend Trip, where we just kind of drink and try to make each other laugh. That one's probably our most laid back show. And then What Mean is a show that I need to bring back at some point, where that's just a general review movie type show, but also like TV and other things. But that being said, now we're going to attempt to do our outro, and through the magic of Zoom and the lag, maybe we'll get close to where we all sound like we're in sync. We'll try to make it happen, guys. So I'll start, you guys kind of follow. We'll come up with an outro eventually.
Eventually.
There we go. We got it.
Do we get a do-over? I actually completely forgot.
Oh yeah. We can do it
Okay.
again. Totally.
Alright, I'll
So
count
wait,
us
so
in.
it's, what is it? It's, we'll come up with an outro eventually.
Eventually.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. We'll
We'll
come
come
up
up with
an
with an
outro
outro
eventually.
eventually. We did it, guys. Awesome. Thank you guys both again for being on. It was a pleasure. Thank you for all of your insights. And also Brian, thank you for paying off that running joke. I always love that borderline personality disorder thing. So it's been a blast, guys. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. This was
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Definitely. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and hit stop right
Are you
here.
gonna end the
Yeah, in the thing.